one of the things that's happening right now too is we're seeing trillions being printed. So money is being printed right now. Now, printing money doesn't improve the currency, it reduces the value of the currency. And right now, the dollar, if you live in the United States, the dollar has really nice purchasing power. But the more bills that are passed that are giving out handouts to people who are in dire need right now, it's going to devalue the dollar. And so fast forward several months, fast forward when the dollar's lost its value. And because of the food shortage, potentially the price of food generally will go up, right? So we're going to get this trillions being printed, which equals a reduced capacity for your dollar to have value. But then you have the cost of food goes up. And we already said earlier that the potential for the availability of food, healthy food particularly, and healthy food is already more expensive. So now you add a shortage to that, the cost is even greater, and then you add the reduction in the dollar, potentially the dollar value. And again, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, folks. I'm just trying to prepare you for the worst potential possible scenario so that you can plan now. Because your dollar today is worth a lot more than it's going to be if we keep printing money. And this is fact. You can't print money out of thin air. It's got to be backed by something tangible. And if you're printing money that doesn't have any backing, then again, the dollar's value is going to go down, and that's going to affect our global. It'll affect us globally, but it'll affect us here in the United States. It'll affect our currency and our ability for our currency to buy that food. And so, if you're not planning for this now, this is a part of it. Your dollar might be worth less in the next 6 months than it's worth today, and the availability might go down, which will increase the cost of the food. So now you're spending even more money than you would have before because food costs even more. And if you're already struggling because of this, right? If you're already one of the small businesses that was hit by COVID-19, what happened? The small businesses, many of them are going out of business. Small business is the one that's being most affected. And this is what the intent for this was not to be given to big corporations like Harvard, and which isn't a small business by any stretch. It wasn't intended to be given to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse or to Shake Shack or to any of the other companies that are taking the bailout money. It was intended to keep small businesses open because small businesses help drive the economy and the economic force. And so a lot of these businesses that are hurting, again, they're not getting the money. The money is actually feeding companies that create the opposite of healthy food, right? Because you look at some of these chains at Shake Shack. How many of you want to go and eat that garbage? How many of you want to go and eat the garbage, the swill at Ruth's Chris? This is my opinion anyway. That's not really real food. They use hydrogenated oils. They don't take care of the animals. The animals that they serve at the restaurants, if you're a steak eater, those are not grass-fed. Those are not animals that were taken well care of during life. So if you are an animal activist, if you're somebody who cares about animals, you shouldn't be eating at those types of places anyway. So again, a lot of that money, okay, that your taxpayer dollars are going toward, that's devaluing the dollar, that was supposed to save small businesses, is now going to restaurant chains, and those chains don't produce healthy food. And so again, we have to think about this from the perspective of where's this all going to take us? Fast forward 3 months, fast forward 6 months. Let me take you down another road. Maybe what happens this fall, if we look at kind of some of the draconian measures the government's different local and state governments have taken with the shutdown. Now, don't get me wrong. I agree that, certain areas of the country were appropriately shut down. New York, limitations of movement to stop the spread was a smart move. But you've got places that had 1 case or 5 cases, and they were shutting down people and locking them down as if quarantining free citizens was ever the answer to disease. And we can see that play out. But what happens if the government takes that same type of approach in the fall? Let's say that COVID comes back in the fall, and let's say that there's some cases in the fall, and so governments panic again. And here we are. We've already got potential for food shortage. We've already got a devaluation of our currency because of printing money to help boost the economy or to help bolster people that are going out of business. But the money went to chain restaurants producing unhealthy food, and all that's really left is unhealthy food. And now we have another quarantine come October or November as the fall starts to hit and vitamin D levels start to drop. Then what? Then what are you going to do? Because if you think there's a food shortage now, if that were to happen in the future, what kind of a food shortage do you think that you're going to see or experience as a second blow? I mean, if you guys recall, just go back in time, 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, when COVID first really came out, one of my shows, and I tried to prepare you and warn you about a month before this thing even hit the States. I tried to warn you to be prepared and to have enough food in case this was really a dangerous pandemic, and that you should be prepared to feed yourself and your families. And remember what happened across the United States. What happened is the grocery store shelves were completely wiped out. They were completely empty. And this is where you saw all the limitations coming to exist. So people were being limited to being able to buy certain quantities at a time. You could only buy a few cans here or there. So again, what if this happens again in the fall, where the same type of draconian measures are taken, and we already have somewhat of a food shortage now. And again, it's not so much that we have less food, so much as it is we have less capacity to get that food delivered and get it out. Because remember, it's not just about whether or not the plants can produce the food. It's also about the transportation. It's about the airplanes. And you look at whether or not the airplanes are flying. I mean, the airplanes are obviously not flying as much today. And it's about whether certain states decide to shut down their borders and allow certain food to be transported across state lines. We just don't know. There's no way to predict. There was no way to predict what was going to happen 6 months ago. If you would have tried to predict what we saw happen in the last 4 months, everybody would have called you crazy then. So again, I'm just trying to prepare you for the potential that this is a very real possible scenario. And if you're not thinking ahead, you should be. And so my recommendation to you is not to hoard food. Some people will call, planning hoarding. It's not hoarding, because you're not hoarding things so other people can't have it. You're actually just planning so that you have enough in case something does happen. That's planning, not hoarding. Don't let anybody make you feel guilty about planning ahead. But my advice is make sure you've got enough on hand so that you can maintain your health, because if we do have bigger problems coming down the pipeline with this thing, you need to be able to be healthy so that you can think and take action, whatever that action needs to be. So again, I wanted to talk with you about that tonight, because it's very, very real possibility that we might be seeing some of this come to fruition. And again, if you're not planning or preparing for it, you should be. Those that plan will be much better positioned for this. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.